The air in the solicitor's office was thick, heavy with the scent of old leather and the acrid metallic tang of suppressed rage. Mr. Henderson, a man whose face seemed permanently set in the expression of a polite pallbearer, had just finished his reading of the final legal document. My father's last will and testament had been pronounced, and the fragile silence of the room shattered instantly. I, Eleanor Caldwell, the quiet daughter who had spent the last year nursing my father, found myself staring directly into the terrifying vortex of my brother's fury. "This is a forgery." Tyler's voice, usually so controlled and smooth, cracked with a raw, ugly intensity that was genuinely frightening. He lunged slightly across the mahogany table, his finger, thick and trembling, pointing directly at my chest. Eleanor manipulated him. She coerced him into signing this travesty. The accusation was a physical blow designed to stagger. Mr. Henderson, the solicitor, remained unmoved, a picture of detached professionalism. "Mr. Caldwell," he stated calmly, adjusting his cufflink, "the document is legally sound, witnessed by 2 independent parties, and executed in full accordance with your father's instructions. We have no reason to believe any foul play occurred." He refused to engage in Tyler's hysteria, his stance a solid legal wall. Mother, however, was already beyond reason. Her face was a shocking shade of crimson, her eyes blazing with a desperate, intense hatred I had never seen directed at me before. She pushed her heavy chair back with a violent scrape that echoed like a gunshot. "I simply cannot believe this," she hissed, her voice low and dangerous. "You have done this, Eleanor. You have betrayed us all." She stormed out, her expensive heels clicking a furious, retreating rhythm down the corridor, leaving behind a wake of shocked silence. The inheritance, now revealed to be entirely mine, was no longer a private family matter. It was a public declaration of the deep, festering fractures that had long existed beneath our family's polished surface. The battle had begun and I was squarely in the crosshairs. The quiet of the solicitor's car park felt almost deafening after the courtroom drama. I sat alone in my reliable, unremarkable car, the engine off, the steering wheel cold and solid beneath my white-knuckled grip. The accusations still reverberated in my skull, Tyler's venomous words playing on a loop. I needed silence, a moment to anchor myself. I closed my eyes and reached for the only comfort I had left, a ghost in the machine. I played the old voicemail, a simple check-in from months ago, but his tone, deep, warm, and utterly trustworthy, was a lifeline. Asterisk, "Just calling to see how you're doing, my girl. Don't work too hard, all right? You're doing good." Asterisk, it was so mundane, yet so profoundly intimate. I leaned my head back against the headrest, letting the familiar cadence wash over me. The weight of the last year, the exhaustion, the isolation, the constant silent battle, pressed down on me, but beneath it a core of steel hardened. I stared out at the indifferent gray concrete. "I kept my promise, Dad," I whispered, the words a fragile breath of air, a vow renewed. The promise was not about the money, but about the trust he had placed in me, and I would not let his final wishes be corrupted by their greed. A year earlier my world had narrowed to the precise, exhausting rhythm of caregiving. The grand house, once bustling with social life, had become a quiet sanctuary, centered entirely around my father's comfort. I remember the weight of the silver spoon in my hand as I carefully delivered a spoonful of pureed salmon to his lips. He was so thin then, his illness a relentless sculptor hollowing out his frame. But his eyes, though often tired, still held that sharp, intelligent spark, and a deep reservoir of trust that was solely for me. My phone, resting on the bedside table, would vibrate periodically with Tyler's unsolicited advice. His texts were always brief, always focused on the material. Updating wills? Solicitor's appointment scheduled? He treated the impending death not as a tragedy but as a transaction. I would dismiss the notifications and turn back to my father, wiping his chin with a linen napkin. The exhaustion was bone deep, a perpetual state of fatigue, yet my quiet devotion was absolute. I was the one who saw the fear in his eyes, the one who held his hand when the pain flared, the one who earned his final silent trust. Tyler's arrival weeks before Dad finally slipped away was a disruptive theatrical event. He swept in from London, impeccably dressed in a suit that probably cost more than my car, trailing a powerful, expensive cologne. His grief was performative, a stage production for Mother and the staff. He dabbed at his eyes with a pristine silk handkerchief, his voice thick with unconvincing emotion. "My dear father," he'd boom, embracing Dad with a careful, almost professional distance. Mother, starved for his attention and validation, instantly fell under his spell. "Look how well Tyler is doing," she would gush to the nurses and household staff. "So devoted, taking time out of his incredibly busy international schedule." His expensive gestures, the grand pronouncements, made my year of quiet, sustained effort vanish. The constant presence, the one administering the medication and cleaning up the messes, became invisible. I was merely the help, while the golden child soaked up the praise, his superficial concern eclipsing my genuine, exhausting devotion. The subtle campaign of manipulation began almost immediately, woven into the fabric of casual conversation. I overheard Tyler whispering to Mother in the drawing room one damp afternoon. He spoke in hushed tones, but his words carried. "Mother, we simply must be vigilant about protecting the family assets," he murmured, his voice dripping with false concern. "Father is confused sometimes, isn't he? We wouldn't want any undue influence or opportunists taking advantage of his diminished capacity." The word opportunists hung in the air, aimed directly at me, the implied threat chilling. My father, resting in his favorite leather armchair near the French doors, was listening. I saw the movement in his eyes when Tyler spoke, a flicker of profound sadness and self-reproach. He caught my eye then, a brief, agonized connection. It was a look of dawning regret, an acknowledgement that he had allowed the dynamics of his family to become so corrupted. He saw the manipulation, and in that moment, I knew he realized the necessity of the radical action he would soon take. Late that same night, long after Tyler and Mother had retired, my father summoned me to his study. The room was dark save for the pool of amber light cast by his heavy bronze desk lamp. He looked terribly fragile, draped in a thick wool dressing gown, but his gaze was clear and focused. He reached slowly into the locked top drawer of his desk and pulled out a thick cream-colored envelope, sealed with a blob of crimson wax. "Eleanor," he rasped, his voice low, a conspiratorial whisper against the silence. "I need you to take this. Keep it safe." He pressed the sealed letter into my hand, the paper cool and crisp. "Do not open this under any circumstances until after the funeral." He held my gaze, his grip surprisingly firm on my wrist. "I know this will cause chaos," he said, his voice dropping further. Weight of his final decision settling in my palm. The funeral was a grand, impersonal affair, a spectacle of societal obligation. Mother, swathed in expensive black crepe, delivered a long, tearful eulogy that focused entirely on her decades of marital sacrifice. Tyler, ever the polished orator, spoke of Dad's business triumphs and the enduring legacy of the Caldwell name. They spoke of a public figure, not the vulnerable man I had cared for. Throughout their speeches, I stood at the periphery, the primary caregiver erased from the narrative. When it was my turn to approach the coffin, I held a single perfect white rose. As I leaned in to place it gently on the polished wood, a small, quiet act of private farewell, Mother moved close beside me. Her voice was a low, cutting hiss meant only for my ears. "You've done enough already," she muttered, her eyes narrowed with pure, bitter condemnation. It was a confirmation of their contempt, a brutal dismissal of my entire year of devotion, cementing my status as the outsider, the unwanted presence who had overstepped. The house was silent days later, a cold monument to absence. I sat in my small study, the sealed letter heavy in my hand. The time for waiting was over. My fingers trembled slightly as I broke the crimson wax seal, the sudden sound of the tearing paper sharp in the quiet room. Inside, my father's familiar, elegant script filled several pages. He explained his rationale with devastating clarity. His growing disillusionment with Tyler's avarice, his recognition of Mother's detachment, and his absolute conviction that I was the only one who truly understood his values. He confirmed he had rewritten the will, leaving the entirety of the estate to me. "Not for greed, my dear Eleanor," he had written, his words searing into my mind. But because I trust your integrity. I trust you to use this wealth to protect my name, to uphold the principles we shared, and to ensure my charitable visions are realized. They will accuse you of manipulation, but you must stand firm. This is your burden and your honor. Tears welled, not for the financial windfall, but for the profound, solitary struggle he had endured in his final months. The burden of his trust was immense, but so too was my determination to honor it. With the weight of the letter's command settled, I moved into a phase of quiet, methodical preparation. My first official act was a discreet meeting with Mr. Henderson, the solicitor. I presented the new will, along with my father's explanatory letter, keeping the entire process strictly confidential from Mother and Tyler. Mr. Henderson, a man who clearly appreciated legal procedure over family drama, confirmed the will's impeccable legality. His advice was precise: prepare for war. I immediately began organizing the extensive financial documents my father had left in my care. Days turned into weeks of meticulous auditing. I cross-referenced bank statements, reviewed investment transactions, and crucially started gathering undeniable proof of Tyler's past financial misconduct. The subtle, authorized withdrawals and questionable transfers I had noticed during my time assisting Dad with his accounts. The groundwork for the inevitable confrontation was being laid, brick by invisible brick. The poison spread quickly. The first whisper reached me through Diana, a friend of Mother's, her voice tight with forced sympathy. "Eleanor, darling, I just heard the most dreadful rumor. Tyler is saying that you took advantage of your poor father's condition." The implication was clear. I was a calculating thief. Soon, the calls became a trickle, then a steady stream, each conversation laced with awkward hesitation and thinly veiled judgment. Tyler was actively constructing a narrative of the victimized family versus the manipulative, greedy daughter. Simultaneously, Mother's communication ceased entirely. My texts, simple, polite inquiries, went unanswered, the read receipts confirming her deliberate, icy boycott. I felt the social fabric around me fraying, the isolation deepening. They were systematically cutting me off, attempting to delegitimize me before the legal battle even began. I understood then that their strategy was to make me buckle under the emotional pressure, but the memory of my father's trust was my shield. The call from the private banking division was entirely unexpected, yet chillingly predictable. The manager, his voice carefully neutral, informed me of a large wire transfer request originating from the estate's primary account. "We just require the executor's authorization, Ms. Caldwell," he stated. Tyler, it appeared, was not even attempting subtlety anymore. He was brazenly trying to raid the estate before probate was complete. The sheer arrogance of the act took my breath away. "I appreciate you contacting me," I replied, keeping my voice steady and professional. "However, I have not authorized any such transfer, nor will I. Please deny the request immediately and flag the attempted transaction." The manager confirmed the denial, promising to log the incident. I made a parallel log in my own records, noting the date, time, and specific amount. This was more than just an attempted theft. It was concrete evidence of bad faith and a clear indicator of Tyler's desperate mindset, a valuable piece of ammunition for the future. The confrontation they had been orchestrating finally arrived. Mother and Tyler staged a formal intervention in the drawing room, the scene set for maximum emotional impact. Mother sat bolt upright, wearing the expression of a woman deeply wronged, while Tyler stood, radiating an air of controlled moral superiority. "Eleanor," Mother began, her voice brittle with manufactured pain, "we are giving you one last chance to do the right thing. Your father would be devastated to see this family fractured over money. Just split the inheritance equally." Tyler followed up, leaning forward conspiratorially. "This isn't about greed, Eleanor. It's about fairness and reputation. Split it and we can present a united front." I remained seated, calm and resolute, refusing to be drawn into their emotional theater. "Dad trusted me for a specific important reason," I stated, meeting Tyler's gaze unflinchingly. "He knew exactly what his legacy required, and I will not betray his trust simply to accommodate your expectations." My refusal was quiet but absolute. My composure only served to enrage Tyler further. The mask of civility he usually wore slipped entirely. "If you refuse, I will initiate extensive legal action, Eleanor," he spat, his voice laced with genuine malice. "I will tie this estate up in court for years until you are forced to capitulate." Mother, seizing the opportunity, piled on the emotional abuse. "You are ungrateful. You are cold and heartless. You have destroyed this family just for a fortune you didn't earn." The torrent of insults was vicious, designed to shatter my resolve. They were convinced that their combined aggression would force me to surrender. I listened patiently, my expression unchanging. But beneath the surface, a crucial piece of strategy was unfolding. I had discreetly activated the recording function on my phone, which lay hidden in the pocket of my blazer. Every threat, every insult, every admission of their true motivations, all of it was being digitally preserved. The recording was insurance, a crucial counter-narrative to their public performance of victimhood. I encountered Tyler's wife, Sarah, at a local delicatessen, a chance meeting that proved invaluable. She looked strained, the veneer of high society polish slightly chipped. After the obligatory strained pleasantries, she inadvertently revealed a significant detail. She was complaining about the pressure of their escalating debts. Honestly, Tyler is so optimistic about the future, she sighed, rolling her eyes slightly. He just bought that monstrous new Range Rover using a temporary credit line. He keeps saying it's fine because he'll pay it off once the will gets fixed. He's so sure he's going to win. I maintained a look of polite concern, but inside I felt a surge of cold validation. Tyler was not just planning to win. He was already spending the anticipated funds, operating on an arrogant certainty that the law would bend to his desires. This was further proof of his presumption and financial recklessness, leveraging the estate before it was legally his. I thanked Sarah for the conversation and retreated, logging the detail immediately. The betrayal deepened when a formal letter arrived from the board of my father's oldest charity, the one focused on youth education. The trustees, clearly bewildered, had attached a lengthy email from Tyler. He had contacted them directly, attempting to claim my father's long-held position as chairman, asserting that as the eldest son, the responsibility fell to him. His email was a carefully constructed piece of professional slander, implying that I was emotionally unstable and financially inept, therefore incapable of carrying on the complex charitable work. He even suggested that I was preoccupied with my personal greed, to focus on the foundation's noble goals. The sheer audacity of his attempt to steal not only the money but also my father's good name and philanthropic work was staggering. It wasn't enough for him to have the wealth. He needed the prestige too, willing to manipulate and lie to achieve it. Tyler's attempt to seize the foundation provided the perfect turning point. I immediately scheduled a meeting with the charity trustees. I didn't waste time addressing Tyler's slander. Instead, I focused entirely on my father's vision and the future financial security of the trust. I presented a detailed plan, demonstrating my comprehension of the foundation's structure and goals. Then I delivered the decisive blow. I announced my intention to endow the trust with a substantial, irrevocable sum from the inheritance, executed under my sole legally protected name. This move instantly secured the foundation's future, tying it directly to my control and my father's original explicit wishes. Tyler's manipulative maneuver to control the board backfired spectacularly. The trustees, relieved and impressed by the financial stability I guaranteed, unanimously rejected Tyler's claims. He had sought control and prestige. Instead, he had merely provided me with the opportunity to permanently safeguard a piece of my father's legacy from his reach. The inevitable public blow-up occurred at a large extended family gathering, a summer garden party held at a distant relative's estate. Tyler, emboldened by alcohol and increasingly desperate over his lack of progress, spotted me near the drinks table. He stomped over, his face contorted with rage, paying no heed to the dozens of relatives who instantly fell silent. "You're stealing from us," he roared, his voice echoing across the manicured lawn. "You're a thief, Eleanor. You manipulated father on his deathbed." The moment was electric, all eyes fixed on us. For months, I had been the silent subject of their whispers. This time I wouldn't retreat. I met his furious gaze and a slow, genuine smile spread across my face. It was the smile of a victor who knows the score. "I'm fulfilling Dad's will, Tyler," I stated clearly, letting my voice carry. Literally. The word was weighted with the legal finality he had failed to grasp. A wave of audible gasps swept through the surrounding relatives. The truth, in its simplest, most brutal form, had been delivered, and the family's collective understanding of the situation shifted irrevocably. The public spectacle had immediate consequences. Mother's silence became absolute, a chilling, permanent cessation of contact. The grand house which I now occupied alone felt like a mausoleum. The isolation was intense, a heavy cloak that settled around me. There were nights when the grief for my father, combined with the profound loneliness of being utterly estranged from my family, became unbearable. I would break down, allowing myself a brief, raw moment of tears and despair in the cavernous, echoing silence. But the collapse never lasted long. I would resurface, driven by a deep, unwavering sense of purpose. I knew my father's intentions were never rooted in financial gain for me. They were rooted in integrity and the protection of his values. The money was merely a tool. That understanding was the anchor that pulled me back from the emotional brink, reminding me that the battle was about honoring his memory, not placating their greed. Working closely with Mr. Henderson, I meticulously restructured the vast estate. This was the final, critical phase of the plan. We didn't just protect the assets, we weaponized the legal framework. I established highly specific conditional clauses within the trust documentation. These clauses stipulated that any beneficiary who could be proven to have acted in bad faith, specifically through legal challenges, attempts at fraud, or financial misconduct aimed at subverting the will, would automatically forfeit their right to any future distribution or claim on the estate. Tyler, still convinced he could dismantle the will through aggressive litigation and public pressure, continued his relentless legal challenges. Every document he filed, every false claim he made, was meticulously documented by my legal team. His overwhelming greed and entitlement were driving him directly into the sophisticated legal trap I had set. The formal notification arrived from the court, delivered to Tyler's legal team with brutal efficiency. His pattern of fraudulent actions, including the attempted bank transfer and the documented attempts to seize control of the charity, were presented as undeniable proof of bad faith. The judge upheld the conditional clause. Tyler had legally voided his entire inheritance. The subsequent collapse was swift and total. His new luxury Range Rover, the one he had so confidently purchased on credit, was repossessed from his driveway. His wife, Sarah, filed for divorce, unwilling to share his public disgrace and crushing debt. Humiliated, ruined, and financially crippled, Tyler's only defense was to lash out, blaming me publicly for his catastrophic downfall. His accusations of ruthlessness, however, now sounded hollow against the backdrop of the court's documented findings regarding his own misconduct. Despite the clear legal outcome, Mother, blinded by her attachment to Tyler and her own sense of entitlement, took the disastrous step of filing her own claim contesting the will. Her legal challenge was poorly conceived and emotionally charged. During the discovery phase, the court's investigation inevitably scrutinized her own financial standing and history. The proceedings exposed years of financial mismanagement and dependence, much of it covered up by my father during his life. Her reckless spending and reliance on Tyler's increasingly unsound advice were laid bare. The court swiftly threw out her claim, not only validating my father's will but publicly exposing her own financial irresponsibility. It was a painful, profound final lesson. Her loyalty to Tyler and her refusal to accept my father's true intent had resulted in her own public and financial downfall. The local newspaper ran a substantial front-page feature, not on the family drama, but on the official launch of the newly endowed Ward Foundation. The article highlighted my quiet strength and dedication, focusing on how I had honored my father's vision for community support and integrity. It contrasted my actions, endowing a charitable foundation, with the selfish motivations of those who had contested the will. The public narrative, which had once been manipulated by Tyler's rumors, now shifted entirely. The story lauded my loyalty and commitment to genuine philanthropy. The Caldwell family name, once synonymous with old money and recent scandal, was thoroughly restored, but the credit belonged solely to me. I had successfully salvaged my father's reputation and established my own, built not on inheritance but on action and integrity. Months later, Tyler appeared at the reception desk of my newly established office, located within the foundation's premises. He was gaunt, his clothing cheap and ill-fitting. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a defeated emptiness. The receptionist hesitantly ushered him into my private meeting room. He looked around the sleek, professional space, the embodiment of the success he had scorned. "You could have helped me, Eleanor," he whispered, his voice hoarse, devoid of its former power. "You could have thrown me a lifeline. We are family. I looked at him calmly, the years of pain and betrayal condensed into a single quiet moment of truth. I felt no triumph, only a detached clarity. I did help you, Tyler, I stated, my voice professional and even. I gave you every opportunity to prove you possessed the decency Dad hoped for. I gave you enough rope. You chose to use it exactly as he predicted. I drove to my father's grave, taking fresh white roses. The cemetery was peaceful, quiet beneath a soft, gray sky. I knelt, arranging the flowers with care. The battle was over, the estate secured, the legacy protected. I looked at the stone, the final resting place of the man who had seen my true worth. They showed who they are, Dad, I whispered, a quiet summation of the last brutal year. They showed their greed, their selfishness, and their profound lack of honor. And in fighting them, I finally showed who I am. A soft, cleansing rain began to fall, pattering gently on the leaves and the polished stone. It was a moment of true, profound closure, a farewell to the past and a welcome to the quiet strength I had found. The transformation was complete. The grand family house, steeped in years of hidden conflict, was now the Ward Foundation for End-of-Life Care, a serene, beautifully designed hospice. It was my father's most profound dream realized, a place of dignity, care, and peace. I walked through the sunlit hallways, the air filled not with tension, but with the gentle sounds of life, quiet conversations, the soft chime of a nurse's bell, and the occasional burst of genuine, unforced laughter. This was the legacy my father had truly wanted. They wanted everything. I gave them exactly what they deserved. And I took what I'd been denied all my life: peace.